I'm Rebecca Thompson, 32 years old, and this should have been the happiest day of my life. After 5 beautiful years with James, I was ready to say I do. Instead, I walked into his apartment and found him in bed with my maid of honor, Stephanie, my best friend since childhood. But I didn't scream or cry. I made one phone call that changed everything. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you're from, hit that like and subscribe button, and stay tuned to hear how I turned what should have been my perfect day into their biggest regret. I met James Carter at a charity gala in downtown Boston 5 years ago. I was there representing the marketing firm where I worked as a director, helping promote the event for one of our non-profit clients. He was tall with warm brown eyes and a smile that made the room feel brighter. When he approached me near the silent auction table, I felt an immediate connection that I had never experienced before. "That painting would look terrible in your living room," he said, nodding toward a gaudy landscape I had been staring at. His unexpected comment made me laugh, and just like that, we fell into easy conversation. James was an architect with his own successful firm designing innovative commercial buildings across the Northeast. He was passionate about his work, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my life and career. By the end of the night, he had my phone number and a promise for dinner that weekend. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. I remember being nervous, changing my outfit 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress. James arrived with a single yellow tulip, having remembered from our brief conversation at the gala that I preferred them to roses. It was a small detail, but it showed me he was different from other men I had dated. He listened. That dinner lasted nearly 4 hours. We talked about everything from our childhood dreams to our favourite books, our career ambitions to our travel bucket lists. It turned out we both loved historical fiction hiking on Sunday mornings and had the same strange preference for cold pizza for breakfast. The connection I had felt at the gala only deepened. From there, our relationship bloomed rapidly. Weekend getaways to coastal Maine, cooking classes where we laughed at our failed soufflés, surprise lunch visits to each other's offices. James was thoughtful in ways that continuously surprised me. He remembered every anniversary, sent flowers just because it was Wednesday, and knew exactly when I needed a quiet night at home versus an adventure to pull me out of a work slump. 2 years into our relationship, we decided to move in together. We found a beautiful brownstone apartment in Back Bay with hardwood floors and large windows that filled the space with natural light. Decorating our home together felt like cementing our future. Every paint color, every piece of furniture was a joint decision, a building block in the life we were creating. "This is where our kids will take their first steps someday," James said, as we arranged the living room, causing my heart to swell with happiness at the thought of our future family. It was around this time that I really began including Stephanie Morgan more actively in our lives. Stephanie and I had been best friends since the 3rd grade when she defended me against playground bullies who made fun of my braces. We had been inseparable throughout school, and even though we attended different colleges, our friendship remained strong. Stephanie had been there for me through everything. When my parents went through a bitter divorce during my senior year of high school, she slept on my bedroom floor for a week so I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts. When I lost out on my first big promotion and cried in the bathroom stall at work, she showed up at my apartment that night with ice cream and reassurance. She knew all my secrets, my fears, my dreams. She was the sister I never had. Naturally, I wanted the 2 most important people in my life to get along. I organised dinners, game nights, and weekend trips for the 3 of us, and was delighted when James and Stephanie seemed to hit it off. They shared a similar sarcastic sense of humour and often ganged up to tease me good-naturedly about my organisation obsession or my inability to watch scary movies without hiding behind a pillow. "You found a good one, Becca," Stephanie told me one night after dinner as James cleared the plates. "He looks at you like you're his whole world." 3 years into our relationship, James planned a surprise trip to Hawaii. I thought it was just a vacation, a break from the Boston winter. On our second night there, he arranged a private dinner on the beach, complete with tiki torches and a violinist playing softly in the background. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, he got down on one knee. "Rebecca Thompson, you make every day of my life better just by being in it. I want to build a life with you, grow old with you, and love you more each day than the last. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a vintage emerald-cut diamond, in a platinum setting, exactly what I had casually mentioned liking months earlier while window shopping. Through happy tears, I said yes, and we spent the rest of the trip in a blissful haze planning our future together. When we returned, Stephanie was the first person I called. She screamed with excitement and insisted on coming over immediately to see the ring and hear every detail. As we sat on my couch drinking champagne and looking at Hawaii photos, I knew there was only one choice for my maid of honor. "Steph, you've been by my side for every important moment of my life. Will you stand next to me for this one too?" She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. Nothing could keep me from it. Wedding planning began immediately. I had always dreamed of a spring ceremony in the Boston Public Garden, followed by an elegant reception at the Four Seasons. James seemed content to let me take the lead, agreeing with most of my suggestions and only occasionally offering input on things like menu selections and the band. Stephanie dove into her maid of honor duties with enthusiasm. She organized dress shopping trips, researched florists, and created detailed spreadsheets to keep everything on track. Looking back, I should have noticed how she gradually took over more and more of the planning, inserting herself into decisions that would typically be between James and me. "I'm just trying to take stress off your plate," she would say when I mentioned her over-involvement. "This should be the happiest time of your life." About 6 months after our engagement, I began noticing subtle changes in James. He started working later, often coming home after I was already asleep. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and distracted. He checked his phone constantly, angling the screen away from me. I dismissed these changes as work stress or wedding jitters, wanting to believe everything was fine. My parents noticed the shift in his behavior too, particularly my father. During a Sunday brunch 3 months into our engagement, my dad pulled me aside while James was chatting with the server. "Sweetheart, is everything okay between you two? He seems different somehow." "We're fine, Dad. He's just busy with a big project at work," I assured him, ignoring the knot forming in my stomach. I didn't want to acknowledge my own growing concerns, the way James no longer looked me in the eye when he said he loved me, how he seemed to find reasons to avoid physical affection. Meanwhile, Stephanie became a fixture in our home. She was always there ostensibly to discuss wedding plans, but I began to notice how she lingered even after decisions were made, how her casual touches on James's arm lasted a beat too long, how their inside jokes multiplied, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own relationship. But each time a doubt crept in, I pushed it away. These were the two people I trusted most in the world. I was just being paranoid, letting wedding stress get to me. Wasn't I 6 months before our wedding day? The subtle changes in James's behavior became impossible to ignore. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I noticed his phone light up with a text. Before he could grab it, I caught a glimpse of the message, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Same time, there was no contact name, just a number. When I asked him about it, he snatched the phone away defensively. "It's just a contractor for the Hamilton project. We're meeting to discuss some changes to the blueprints." The explanation seemed reasonable, but his reaction didn't match. His ears reddened the way they always did when he wasn't being entirely truthful. Still, I wanted to believe him. Around this time, Stephanie began visiting our apartment almost daily. She always had a reason, dropping off wedding magazines, bringing fabric swatches, discussing seating arrangements. But these tasks never seemed to take less than 2 or 3 hours. and often happened when she knew I'd be working late. "I'm just trying to help," she would say when I mentioned her frequent presence. "There's still so much to do." I also noticed changes in her appearance. Stephanie had always been pretty in a natural, understated way. Suddenly, she was highlighting her hair to a shade suspiciously similar to mine, wearing more makeup and dressing in styles I typically favoured. When I complimented a new dress, she smiled strangely and said, "I thought it might look good on me too." 3 months before the wedding, we hosted a dinner party for our closest friends. I was in the kitchen plating desserts when I glimpsed James and Stephanie through the doorway. They stood close together near the bookshelf, their heads bent in private conversation. As I watched, Stephanie placed her hand on James's chest, leaning in to whisper something that made him laugh softly. When she pulled back, their eyes held for a moment too long before James noticed me watching and abruptly stepped away. My stomach clenched, but I forced a smile and carried the desserts into the dining room as if nothing had happened. Later that night, I asked James about the exchange. "What were you and Steph whispering about?" "Nothing important," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Just a joke about Taylor's new boyfriend." The explanation didn't sit right, but confronting him directly meant acknowledging the possibility of something I couldn't bear to face. Instead, my mind began cataloguing other moments, how James always seemed to know Stephanie's schedule, how she often wore a perfume I didn't recognize, how they both checked their phones simultaneously sometimes, as if responding to the same message. Anxiety began to gnaw at me, disrupting my sleep and focus at work. Was I imagining things, projecting my own insecurities onto innocent interactions? I started second-guessing everything, including my own judgment. I decided to confide in my younger brother Michael, who had always been my voice of reason. Over coffee one Saturday, while James was allegedly at the gym, I shared my suspicions. "Do you think I'm being paranoid? Am I seeing things that aren't there?" Michael considered my words carefully. "That does sound a bit off, but it could be innocent. They're both under pressure with the wedding too. Have you tried asking Stephanie directly?" I hadn't, partly because I was afraid of what she might say, but mostly because I didn't want to accuse my best friend without concrete evidence. Michael suggested I pay attention but not jump to conclusions, advice that seemed reasonable but did little to quiet my growing unease. A week later, James came home late again, claiming he'd been working on a difficult client presentation. When he hugged me, I detected an unfamiliar floral scent on his shirt collar, something sweet and distinctive that definitely wasn't my perfume. "New cologne?" I asked lightly, though my heart was racing. He stiffened momentarily before relaxing. "One of the interior designers at the office was wearing strong perfume during our meeting. Must have rubbed off." The explanation was plausible, but something in his voice didn't ring true. Still, I nodded and let it go, hating the part of me that immediately pictured Stephanie, who had recently mentioned switching to a new fragrance. As the wedding approached, Stephanie took charge of planning my bachelorette party. Traditionally held the weekend before the wedding, she insisted on scheduling it 3 weekends prior. "The venue I want is only available then," she explained. "Plus this way, you'll be fully recovered for the wedding photos." What struck me as odd was how adamant she was that James attend his bachelor party the exact same weekend, even going so far as to coordinate with his best man, Drew, to ensure the dates aligned. When I suggested James and I might want one last weekend together before the wedding chaos fully descended, Stephanie became uncharacteristically irritated. "Trust me, it's better this way. You'll both appreciate the break from wedding stress." I reluctantly agreed, trying to ignore the voice in my head asking why my maid of honor seemed so invested in ensuring my fiancé and I were in different cities for an entire weekend. At a Sunday brunch with friends the following week, someone inadvertently dropped a comment that made my blood run cold. Lisa, a college friend who wasn't part of our regular circle, mentioned seeing James and that blonde friend of yours at a restaurant in Cambridge. "They looked deep in conversation," she said casually. "I was going to stop by and say hi, but they seemed so intense I didn't want to interrupt." When I asked when this had happened, Lisa said it was the previous Tuesday, a night when James had told me he was working late. Stephanie had claimed to be at a yoga workshop that same evening. That afternoon, I tried to broach the subject with Stephanie as we looked at flower arrangements. Lisa mentioned seeing you and James at a restaurant last week, I said, keeping my tone neutral while watching her reaction carefully. Stephanie's hands froze momentarily over the photo book before she continued turning pages. Oh, that! Yes, we ran into each other while getting takeout. Ended up sitting for a quick bite while discussing your birthday surprise. She looked up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You weren't supposed to find out. James wanted to plan something special. My birthday was 4 months away, and James and I already had a standing tradition of weekend trips to Vermont to celebrate. The explanation didn't make sense, but Stephanie quickly changed the subject to centerpiece options, and I let her feeling increasingly gaslighted by the two people I trusted most. The final month before our wedding was a whirlwind of last-minute preparations, vendor confirmations, and growing anxiety that had nothing to do with normal pre-wedding jitters. Every instinct told me something was wrong, but I kept pushing those feelings aside, focusing instead on checklist items and finalizing details. My final dress fitting was scheduled 3 weeks before the wedding. Stephanie insisted on accompanying me, claiming it was her maid of honor duty to ensure everything was perfect. At the bridal salon, she was strangely controlling, questioning the seamstress about every stitch and fold, almost as if the dress were hers rather than mine. The bustle needs to be exactly right, she instructed, hovering over the woman's shoulder. This has to be a perfect day. Her intensity made me uncomfortable, especially when she began suggesting last-minute alterations that reflected her taste rather than mine. When I gently disagreed with one of her suggestions, her eyes narrowed briefly before she forced a smile. Of course it's your wedding. I just want it to be everything you deserve. Something in her tone sent a chill through me, but I dismissed it, attributing her behavior to taking her maid of honor responsibilities too seriously. That evening, I arrived home earlier than expected from a dinner with colleagues. As I entered our apartment, I heard James on the phone in our bedroom, his voice low and intimate, in a way that made me freeze in the hallway. I know it's complicated. Yes, of course I still want to. No, she doesn't suspect anything. After the honeymoon, we'll figure it out, I promise. My heart pounding, I deliberately made noise with my keys, giving him time to end the call before I entered the bedroom. When I walked in, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone now on the nightstand, face down. Hey, you're home early, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The dinner wrapped up sooner than expected, I replied, studying his face. Who were you talking to? Just Drew, finalizing some bachelor party details. He stood up, kissing me quickly before heading to the bathroom. How was your dinner? I wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but fear held me back. Fear of what I might discover, fear of having to make difficult decisions so close to our wedding day. So I let it go, adding it to the growing pile of suspicions I was trying desperately to ignore. A week later, James announced he needed to take an unexpected business trip. A client in Chicago was having issues with a project, and he needed to be there in person to resolve them. It's terrible timing, I know, he said, looking genuinely apologetic. But it's just for 2 days, and then I'll be fully focused on our wedding. I nodded understandingly, though anxiety gnawed at my insides. When do you leave? Tomorrow morning. I should be back Thursday night. Stephanie called that evening ostensibly to check on how I was feeling about the rapidly approaching wedding. When I mentioned James's trip, she didn't seem surprised. That's too bad, she said, her tone oddly flat. But at least it's just a short trip, and I'm here if you need company while he's gone. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, a terrible suspicion forming. Acting on impulse, I called James's office the next morning, only to be told by his assistant that he had no meetings scheduled in Chicago that week. My hands shaking, I logged into our shared credit card account. There it was, a hotel reservation in Cape Cod for 2 nights, including the honeymoon suite package with champagne service. Cape Cod, not Chicago. and the honeymoon suite not a standard business accommodation. When James returned Thursday night tanned despite Chicago's reported rainy weather that week, I confronted him with the hotel receipt I had printed out. "I can explain," he said immediately, his face paling. It was supposed to be a surprise. I wanted to check out the hotel as a potential anniversary destination for us next year, make sure it was perfect. The honeymoon suite for a scouting trip, and why lie about Chicago? I didn't want to ruin the surprise, he insisted, taking my hands in his. I know how you love the Cape, and I wanted to have everything planned for a special getaway after all the wedding stress dies down. His explanation made a certain kind of sense, but didn't explain the reservation for two, or why his assistant thought he was taking personal days rather than attending business meetings. Before I could press further, my phone rang. It was Stephanie. James's relief when I answered was palpable, and became even more suspicious when Stephanie immediately launched into a detailed question about the wedding menu that could have easily waited until the next day. After I hung up, James suggested we watch a movie and relax, clearly hoping to distract me from further questions. I agreed, too emotionally exhausted to continue the confrontation. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering when the man I loved had become a stranger and whether my best friend had helped him do it. The wedding rehearsal dinner 2 days later was a study in tension beneath a veneer of celebration. My parents hosted at an upscale restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, and everyone played their parts perfectly. James was attentive. Stephanie was the enthusiastic maid of honor, and I smiled until my cheeks hurt, all while feeling like I was performing in some bizarre play rather than preparing for the happiest day of my life. During a quiet moment on the restaurant's terrace, my father approached a tumbler of whiskey in his hand and concern in his eyes. "Rebecca, is everything all right? You don't seem like yourself." I considered lying, maintaining the facade, but something in my father's steady gaze broke through my defenses. "I'm not sure, Dad. I have this feeling that something's wrong with James and me, but I can't put my finger on it exactly." He nodded slowly, sipping his drink before responding. "I've always trusted your judgment, sweetheart. If something feels wrong, listen to that feeling. It's not too late to postpone if you need more time." His words hit me harder than I expected. Until that moment, I hadn't consciously considered delaying the wedding. The thought of the embarrassment, the explanations, the lost deposits, had seemed too overwhelming. But my father's simple statement gave me permission to acknowledge my doubts were real and significant. Before I could respond, Stephanie appeared, looping her arm through mine. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Thompson, but the photographer wants some bride and maid of honor shots before the light changes." As she led me away, I caught my father watching us, his expression troubled. The night before the wedding, Stephanie insisted on staying at my apartment, claiming it was tradition for the maid of honor to help the bride prepare. James, meanwhile, announced he needed to finish an important project at the office before we left for our honeymoon. "I'll be working late, but it means I'll be completely free for our 2 weeks in Italy," he promised, kissing me goodbye. "Try to get some sleep tonight, okay? Tomorrow is going to be amazing." Stephanie ordered takeout and opened a bottle of wine, reminiscing about our childhood adventures and college mishaps, as if nothing was amiss. I played along, laughing at her stories, while a part of me observed her performance with growing suspicion. Around 9 o'clock, she received a text that made her frown. "It's my mum," she explained quickly. "She's having trouble with her GPS getting to the hotel. I need to talk her through it." She stepped into the guest bedroom, closing the door behind her. I moved closer, straining to hear her conversation, but could only make out fragments. "Not now. Too risky. She's right here." When she emerged 20 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed, and she immediately poured herself another large glass of wine. Crisis averted. Mum safely at the hotel. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We watched a romantic comedy, neither of us paying much attention, before finally heading to bed around midnight. Sleep eluded me as I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying countless interactions between James and Stephanie, seeing them with new clarity. By 5 the next morning, my wedding day, I had made a decision. I needed to know the truth, one way or another, before I walked down the aisle. I dressed quietly, leaving Stephanie still asleep in the guest room. I scribbled a note saying I needed some fresh air and would be back soon. I decided to surprise James with breakfast, a final attempt to reconnect before our lives changed forever. I stopped at our favourite bakery, purchasing his favourite almond croissants and strong coffee, then drove to his apartment. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect weather for an outdoor wedding. As I parked outside his building, I noticed a familiar car already in the lot, a white Audi with a small dent in the rear bumper. Stephanie's car. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to breathe. There could be an explanation. Maybe she'd come early to help him with some wedding day surprise. Maybe she'd lent her car to someone. Maybe. But as I used my key to quietly enter James's apartment, hearing muffled laughter and movement from the bedroom, I knew. I had always known. I stood frozen in the entryway of James's apartment, the bakery bag clutched in my hand as the sounds from the bedroom became unmistakable. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, and pretend I hadn't heard anything. The other part needed confirmation, needed to face the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Taking a deep breath, I moved silently down the hallway. The bedroom door was partially open, and what I saw through that gap shattered the last of my illusions. James and Stephanie were in his bed, their bodies entwined, completely oblivious to my presence. The intimacy between them was not new or fumbling, but practiced and familiar. This was not a first-time indiscretion, but an established affair. I must have made some small sound because James suddenly looked up and our eyes locked, the colour drained from his face. "Rebecca, why are you here?" he stammered frantically, pulling the sheet up as Stephanie turned her expression morphing from confusion to horror. "Oh my God!" she gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Rebecca, we didn't." I remained in the doorway, strangely calm, as if I were watching this scene happen to someone else. The breakfast bag slipped from my fingers, spilling coffee across the hardwood floor. "How long?" I asked, my voice steadier than I would have expected. They exchanged glances, a silent communication that only confirmed the depth of their betrayal. "It's not what you think," James began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't insult me further by lying." "How long?" Stephanie spoke first, her voice small. 3 months, but it wasn't planned, Rebecca. It just happened. 3 months, I repeated. 3 months meant it had started well before James's proposal. It meant countless lies, deceptions, moments where they had both looked me in the eye and pretended to care about me, about our wedding, about our future. "I was going to tell you," James said, reaching for his discarded boxers. "After the wedding, I was going to ask for some time to figure things out." "After the wedding?" I repeated, incredulous. "You were going to marry me, knowing you were in love with my best friend, knowing you were sleeping with her behind my back." "It's complicated," Stephanie interjected, tears streaming down her face. "We never meant to hurt you. Then why are you in his bed on our wedding day?" My voice finally cracked the reality of their betrayal beginning to penetrate my shock. They scrambled to get dressed, both talking at once, offering pathetic excuses and explanations. James claimed it was just physical at first, that he got confused about his feelings. Stephanie insisted she had tried to end it several times, but couldn't help herself. As they dressed and continued their desperate justifications, more truths emerged. Their affair had begun at a happy hour when I was out of town for work. What started as drinks had led to dinner then to his apartment. After that first night, they had manufactured countless reasons to be alone together. "All those wedding planning sessions?" I asked Stephanie. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Some were real. The late nights at work," I turned to James. "I was with her most of them," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "The Chicago business trip that was actually a romantic getaway to Cape Cod. The mysterious text messages, the shared glances, the constant undermining of my confidence making me feel paranoid for noticing what was plainly happening right in front of me. Stephanie took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. "Rebecca, please, you have to understand. I never expected to fall for him. We fought it, but don't touch me," I said, stepping back. "Don't you dare try to make this sound like some grand love story. You were my best friend. I trusted you both more than anyone in the world." "The wedding is in 4 hours," James said suddenly, as if just remembering. "We need to figure out what to do. People will be arriving soon, expecting a ceremony. Are you seriously worried about the logistics right now?" I stared at him in disbelief. "It's just that there are 200 people coming. The vendors are all paid," he stammered. "It would be a scene and your parents have invested so much." "He's right," Stephanie added quickly. "Maybe we should handle this quietly. Tell everyone after the fact that it didn't work out. Avoid the public embarrassment." The realization dawned on me that they were more concerned about their reputations, about how they would appear to friends and family, than about the pain they had caused me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The numbness receded, replaced by a cold, clear anger. "You're worried about a scene," I repeated slowly. "About embarrassment." They both nodded relief, crossing their faces, as they mistakenly thought I was agreeing to their plan of a quiet cancellation. "I'm going to go now," I said calmly. "Don't follow me." "Rebecca, wait!" James called as I turned to leave. "What are you going to do?" I paused in the doorway, looking back at the two people who had betrayed me so completely. "I haven't decided yet, but when I do, you'll know." I walked out of the apartment with my head high, not allowing myself to break down until I was safely in my car. As soon as the door closed, the tears came in a flood accompanied by great heaving sobs that felt torn from the depths of my soul. I cried for the relationship I thought I had, for the best friend I had loved, like a sister for the future I had planned that was now in ashes. After several minutes, I forced myself to take deep breaths to stem the tide of emotion threatening to drown me. I looked at my watch. 3 hours and 40 minutes until guests would begin arriving at the Boston Public Garden for our ceremony. I had a decision to make. I could call the wedding planner and cancel everything, citing a vague emergency. I could disappear perhaps to my parents' vacation home in Maine and let James and Stephanie handle the aftermath. It would be the dignified approach, the one that would spare everyone public embarrassment. Or I could take a different path. The two of them expected me to slink away in shame, to quietly bear the burden of their betrayal, while they continued their relationship, perhaps even eventually marrying with the blessing of friends who would never know the truth. They would be viewed with sympathy for the failed engagement, while I would be the subject of whispered speculations. My hands stopped shaking as clarity washed over me. I deserved better than to carry their secret. I deserved the truth to be known. I picked up my phone and made the call that would change everything. "Michael, it's me," I said when my brother answered, my voice still thick from crying. "I need your help." "Becca, what's wrong? Are you okay?" The concern in his voice nearly set off another round of tears. "No, I'm not okay. I just walked in on James and Stephanie in bed together." "What?" His shock quickly turned to anger. "Those bastards! Where are you now?" "In my car outside his apartment," I replied, wiping away tears. "The wedding's in less than 4 hours. I'm coming to get you. We'll call everything off. Don't worry about—" "No," I interrupted a plan forming in my mind. "I don't want to call it off. Not exactly." "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "James and Stephanie are hoping I'll quietly disappear, cancel everything discreetly to avoid embarrassing them, but why should I protect them after what they've done?" There was silence on the line as Michael absorbed my words. "What did you have in mind?" he finally asked. "You're a wedding videographer," I said. "You have access to the venue's audio-visual system." "I do," he confirmed slowly. I want everyone to know exactly why this wedding isn't happening. I want the truth projected for all 200 guests to see. Michael didn't hesitate. I'm in. What do you need? Do you still have those photos from the Christmas party? The ones with James and Stephanie in the background looking too cozy? I think so. And I have video from the engagement party where he disappeared for 20 minutes at the same time she did. Perfect. Can you put together a short presentation? Nothing vulgar, just enough evidence that no one can deny what's been happening. Consider it done, Michael replied, determination in his voice. What else? I need you to call Drew and Marcus. I said, naming two of our cousins who worked in private security. I want them at the ceremony, just in case James or Stephanie tries to stop the presentation. They'll be there. What about you? What are you going to do now? I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Despite the tear tracks on my cheeks, I felt a strange sense of power returning. I'm going to the venue. The wedding is still happening today, just not the one James and Stephanie are expecting. After hanging up with Michael, I drove to the Four Seasons, where the reception was scheduled. The wedding planner, Julia, was already there overseeing the final setup. Rebecca, you're not supposed to be here yet, she exclaimed when she saw me. And where's your dress? Your hair isn't done. Change of plans, Julia, I said calmly. The ceremony is still happening, but there's been a slight adjustment to the program. Her eyes widened at my tone, but to her credit, she quickly composed herself. What do you need? I explained that there would be a special presentation before the ceremony and that I wanted her to ensure all guests were seated at the appointed time, no matter what. I also asked her to prepare the microphone for me to make an announcement. Is everything okay? She asked hesitantly. It will be, I assured her with more confidence than I felt. Next, I called my parents. They deserved to know what was happening before they arrived at the venue. My mother answered on the second ring. Rebecca, shouldn't you be getting your hair done? Mum, I need to tell you and Dad something important. I said, my voice steady. Can you put me on speaker? I explained the situation as concisely as possible, sparing them the most painful details, but making it clear what James and Stephanie had done. There was a long silence when I finished. What do you want to do, sweetheart? My father finally asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I'm going to expose them, I replied. At the ceremony, I want everyone to know the truth. Are you sure that's what you want? My mother asked gently. It's not too late to simply cancel. I'm sure. They don't get to control this narrative. They don't get to make me disappear quietly while they continue their affair. Then we're behind you 100%, my father declared. What can we do to help? Just be there, act normal until the ceremony begins. I'll handle the rest. After reassuring my parents once more, I drove to my apartment to shower and change. I chose a simple white sheath dress from my closet. Not my wedding gown, but elegant enough for what I had planned. As I applied my makeup covering the signs of tears, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from both James and Stephanie. I ignored them all, focusing instead on preparing myself mentally for what was to come. Michael called to confirm he had created the presentation and secured the cooperation of the venue's AV team. Drew and Marcus were already at the venue, positioned strategically. He had also contacted James's boss, mentioning only that there was something important he should witness at the ceremony. By the time I arrived back at the venue, guests were beginning to arrive. I stationed myself in a room off the main hall, watching through a crack in the door as the seats filled. James arrived looking visibly nervous, constantly checking his phone and glancing toward the entrance. Stephanie was conspicuously absent from the line of bridesmaids gathering near the back. As the appointed time for the ceremony approached, I saw James pull the officiant aside, gesturing anxiously. The wedding planner intercepted them, saying something that made James's face pale further. He took his place at the altar, tugging at his collar repeatedly. Michael slipped into my hiding place. Everything's ready. The presentation is queued up. Drew and Marcus are in position. Are you absolutely sure about this? I met my brother's concerned gaze steadily. I've never been more sure of anything. He squeezed my hand. Then let's do this. The string quartet began playing the processional music. On cue, the bridesmaids walked down the aisle, confusion evident on their faces at Stephanie's absence. The guests shifted in their seats, whispering questions to one another. Then the wedding march began, and all heads turned toward the back, expecting to see me in my wedding gown on my father's arm. Instead, I walked alone down the aisle in my simple white dress, my head high, my steps measured and deliberate. James's eyes widened in shock as I approached. Before he could speak, I turned away from him to face our assembled guests. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I know you were expecting a wedding, and there will be one. But first, there's something you all need to know." I nodded to Michael, who pressed a button on his remote. The large screens that had been set up to display wedding photos throughout the reception now showed a different kind of presentation. First came photos from various events over the past year, innocuous at first glance, but with James and Stephanie visible in the background, standing too close, touching too intimately. Then video clips of them disappearing together at parties, returning at suspiciously similar times with rumpled clothing or flushed faces. The gasps and murmurs from the audience grew as the evidence mounted. James lunged toward the AV table, but Drew stepped smoothly into his path, crossing his arms and shaking his head slightly. I continued speaking as the presentation played. "This morning I went to surprise James with breakfast before our wedding. Instead, I found him in bed with my maid of honour and best friend of 20 years, Stephanie Morgan." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. James's mother covered her mouth with her hand, while his father stared at him with open disgust. Stephanie had apparently entered during the commotion and now stood frozen at the back of the room, all eyes turning to find her. Their affair has been going on for months, right through our engagement, the planning of this very wedding. My voice nearly broke, but I steadied myself. When I discovered them this morning, they were more concerned with avoiding public embarrassment than with the pain they had caused. They wanted me to quietly cancel everything and disappear. I turned to face James directly for the first time, but that's not going to happen. I won't protect people who betrayed my trust so completely. I won't carry the shame that belongs to you. The final image on the screen was a text message James had sent Stephanie, accidentally captured when Michael was helping him with phone issues months earlier. "Can't wait until R is out of town again. Miss your body against mine." The evidence was irrefutable. James stood with his head bowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Stephanie had sunk into a chair at the back, tears streaming down her face. I addressed our guests once more. "I've asked you all here today to witness honesty and commitment. While that won't be taking place in the form of vows between James and me, I hope you'll stay to celebrate something else, my freedom from a relationship built on lies." At that moment, the venue doors opened and James's boss, Mr. Calloway, entered with several other executives from his firm. Their faces registered shock as they took in the scene and the images still displayed on the screens. "Mr. Calloway," I acknowledged him with a nod. "Thank you for coming. I believe some of the hotel receipts from James and Stephanie's rendezvous were charged to the company credit card, Cape Cod specifically. You might want to audit those expenses." James's face went from pale to ashen as he realized the professional consequences of his actions were just beginning. I turned back to the assembled guests. "The reception will still take place as planned. The food is paid for, the band is here, and I see no reason why we shouldn't celebrate the truth coming to light. As for the honeymoon, I've donated the entire cost to the Boston Women's Shelter in James's name. They send their thanks." The room was silent for a moment before someone in the back began to applaud. Others joined in until the entire assembly was on their feet. My parents moved to stand beside me, my father's arm firm around my shoulders. James finally found his voice. "Rebecca, you've made your point. This public humiliation was unnecessary." "Actually, James, it was entirely necessary," I replied calmly. "You and Stephanie chose to betray me in the most intimate way possible. You don't get to dictate how I respond to that betrayal. As security escorted James and Stephanie from the venue, amid whispers and open glares, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The phone call that morning had changed everything, not just the course of this day, but the course of my life. Instead of beginning a marriage based on lies, I had reclaimed my power and my truth. The ceremony site transformed into an unexpected celebration of resilience rather than romance. And as I looked around at the supportive faces of true friends and family, I knew I would be okay. The hours after my confrontation with James and Stephanie passed in a blur. The wedding planner, Julia, reorganized the reception into what she dubbed a freedom celebration with remarkable efficiency. The band played upbeat songs rather than romantic ballads. The first dance was replaced with a group dance, and someone even managed to change the wording on the cake from "Congratulations, James and Rebecca" to simply "Congratulations, Rebecca." Friends and family surrounded me with support, from tearful hugs to promises of revenge that made me laugh despite everything. My father gave an impromptu toast that had everyone raising their glasses to Rebecca's courage and new beginnings. In the days that followed, I retreated to my parents' home outside Boston, ignoring the barrage of calls and texts from both James and Stephanie. Their messages evolved from initial defensiveness, "You didn't have to humiliate us publicly," to anger, "What you did was cruel and unnecessary," to eventual pleading, "Please talk to us, we need closure." I gave them no response. They had forfeited any right to my time or attention. The emotional aftermath hit me in waves. Some mornings I woke up feeling empowered by my decision to expose their betrayal. Other days I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by grief for the relationship and friendship I had lost. I cried for the future I had planned for the children James and I had talked about having, for the history I shared with Stephanie that was now tarnished beyond repair. My brother Michael became my rock during this period. He came over nearly every day, sometimes just sitting quietly with me, other times forcing me out for walks or bringing silly movies to distract me. He never once suggested I should get over it or move on, understanding that healing would take time. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he told me one evening when I apologized for another crying jag. "What they did was terrible. You're allowed to grieve." 3 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I received an unexpected email from Alex Peterson, the head of marketing at a prestigious firm in San Francisco. We had met at a conference the previous year and kept in loose professional contact. "I heard about what happened," he wrote. "I'm sorry you went through that. On a separate note, we have an executive marketing director position opening up next month. Your name was the first that came to mind. No pressure, but if you're interested in a fresh start, I'd love to discuss it." The timing of the offer seemed almost providential. Boston held too many memories now, too many places where I might run into James or Stephanie, too many pitying glances from acquaintances who had heard the story. After discussing it with my family and close friends, I accepted the position. Within a month, I had sold most of my furniture, packed what remained, and moved across the country to begin a new chapter. San Francisco was exactly what I needed. The job was challenging in the best way, forcing me to focus my energy on work rather than ruminating on betrayal. I rented a small but sunny apartment near Golden Gate Park, decorated it with the new furniture that held no memories, and slowly began building a routine that felt like my own. I found a therapist who specialized in helping people recover from relationship betrayal. Dr. Rivera helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for James and Stephanie's choices, that their affair reflected their character, not my worth. The way they treated you says nothing about your value and everything about their lack of integrity, she reminded me in our sessions. Gradually, I learned to trust my instincts again. I realized I had known something was wrong for months, but had dismissed my concerns out of fear and a desire to believe in the people I loved. Never again would I ignore those internal warning signals. Through therapy and reflection, I also came to understand that while James and Stephanie's actions were unforgivable, holding on to anger would only hurt me in the long run. Forgiveness didn't mean condoning what they did or allowing them back into my life. It meant releasing the hold their betrayal had on my heart and future. About 6 months after moving to San Francisco, I received word through mutual friends that James and Stephanie's relationship had imploded spectacularly. Apparently, the foundation of lies and betrayal that brought them together couldn't sustain a healthy relationship. James had been caught cheating on Stephanie with a colleague at his new firm. He'd been fired from his previous position after the expense account audit I'd triggered. Stephanie had responded by destroying his belongings and posting their private messages on social media. The news brought me no joy, just a sense of sad inevitability. People who betray those who trust them most don't suddenly develop integrity in new relationships. My own healing continued sometimes in unexpected ways. I joined a hiking group that explored the beautiful trails around the Bay Area every weekend. During one such hike, I met David, a software engineer with kind eyes and an easy laugh who had recently moved from Seattle. "You look familiar," he said, when we were paired up during a group water break. "Have we met before?" It turned out he had been a guest's +1 at my non-wedding, a college friend of one of James's cousins. He had witnessed the entire confrontation and aftermath. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen anyone do," he told me. "I didn't know you then, but I remember thinking whoever that woman was, she deserved way better." His honesty and directness were refreshing. We became friends, first meeting for coffee after hikes, then gradually expanding to dinners and museum visits. He never pushed for more, respecting my need to move slowly to rebuild trust in my own time. On the 1-year anniversary of what should have been my wedding day, my co-workers were surprised when I brought cupcakes to the office. "It's my freedom day," I explained with a genuine smile. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party for the new friends I'd made in San Francisco, celebrating how far I'd come rather than dwelling on what I'd lost. When James tried to contact me on that anniversary with a long email full of apologies and explanations, I read it once, then deleted it without responding. His words no longer had power over me. Looking back now, I can see how that devastating discovery on my wedding day ultimately saved me from a lifetime with someone who didn't truly value me. Had I not walked in on James and Stephanie that morning, I might have married him only to discover his infidelity years later, perhaps after we had children, when disentangling our lives would have been even more painful and complicated. That single phone call to my brother set in motion a chain of events that allowed me to reclaim my narrative, to stand in my truth, rather than hiding in shame for something that was never my fault. It transformed what could have been my greatest humiliation into a powerful moment of self-advocacy and boundary setting. The experience taught me that we can't control what others do, only how we respond. It showed me my own resilience, my capacity to rebuild after devastating loss. Most importantly, it taught me that genuine love doesn't require compromising your self-respect or ignoring your instincts. I'm not the same person I was before that wedding day. I'm stronger, more discerning, more attuned to my own worth. I've learned that while trust is always a risk, trusting yourself first is essential. If you're going through something similar, know this: betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise afterward does. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. Never settle for less, even when it's painful to walk away. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that completely changed the course of your life? Has betrayal ever led you to a better path you wouldn't have chosen otherwise? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is always the right choice, even when it's the hardest one. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you.